Zora and Me, Chapter 18. We hadn't just been imagining things. We had heard a voice. It was Mr. Pender's. He carried me up Blue Sink's rocky, slippery hill and all the way to the Hurstons' house. In his arms, with Zora and Teddy nearby, I was in too much pain to question anything. When we got to the Hurston house, Zora and Teddy guided Mr. Pender to the dining room, where he laid me on the table. By then I was singing like I had a brand new pair of lungs and was trying them out for the very first time. In my adult state, I was still singing to set Ivory's spirit free. I went down to the gypsy to get my fortune told. She said what's lost is lost, even if it's got a home. Feel all alone, feel so alone. Looking and finding folks, feel all alone. Teddy held my right hand and tried to shush me, but sweetly, very sweetly. His eyes were shiny with tears. He squeezed my hand, and some water spilled out of his eyes. I stopped singing and held on to his hand. Mrs. Hurston came rushing into the dining room with a candlestick, Sarah right behind her. "What in the world?" Mrs. Hurston asked. "Mr. Pender?" Mr. Pender was a slim, bald, pecan-brown man. His voice was gentle and a little hoarse, like a soft humming machine that didn't get much use, but it was also gentle and comforting to listen to. "I heard these kids outside my house. Then this one here," he said, nodding his head down at me, "she ran right over the edge." Mrs. Hurston was at my side immediately. "Y'all better be glad Daddy ain't here," Sarah said. "If he was, he'd rip a tree up out of the ground by now and would be whipping y'all with the roots." Zora ignored her sister. "Just help Carrie, Mama," she whispered. "Just help her." "Where does it hurt, baby?" Mrs. Hurston asked softly. Despite the hammering pain, I was beginning to come back to myself. "My shoulder," I said in a voice that sounded like a mouse squeak. The power it had when I was singing had gone. I felt weak. I could barely feel anything besides Teddy holding my hand. Mrs. Hurston turned her ear so it was right up close to my lips. "What did you say, child?" "It's her shoulder, Mama," said Zora. "Look." She didn't have to ask which one. Zora told me later that my two shoulders looked like a pair of steps framing my head, the left considerably lower than my right. "Mr. Pender," Mrs. Hurston instructed, "we're going to have to set this bone together. You hold her left arm against her body real tight." Mr. Pender took hold of my arm and pressed it into my rib cage. I didn't yell out, but I began streaming tears. I was too awake for my own good. I wished I was asleep, but there was no use in trying. The pain was too much. "Got her tight?" Mrs. Hurston asked Pender. "Yes," he answered. Then Mrs. Hurston started grunting. I couldn't stand to watch her face contort, so I closed my eyes and started to sing again. From underneath my armpit, she pulled the left side of my body up with as much force as I had ever felt. Barely 5 feet tall, Lucy Hurston was a testament to big strength coming in dainty packages. When my left shoulder was flush with my right one, Mrs. Hurston herself started singing. "This girl ain't gone lopsided," she sang, "but both her arms gone swing the same, both her arms gone swing the same." Mr. Pender wandered off into the kitchen and came back with a piece of firewood. He took it and made me a splint on the spot. Zora spoke directly to Mr. Pender for the first time. "How'd you know to do that?" Mr. Pender shrugged. "Just carpentry. Setting bones and the like ain't no different than building anything else. You always got to make sure what you're working with is plumb, put straight." We had all been put straight. Mr. Pender wasn't a monster, much less a gator man. There he was in the Hurston home, humble and helpful. Mrs. Hurston warmed him a cup of coffee in the embers of the hearth, and he smiled in shy thanks. He was simply a man, a citizen of Eatonville, and fully human.